Good morning, or depending when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of voice radio. So today, I am somewhat childishly excited to show you one of, and I do not say this lightly, ladies and gentlemen, I do not say this lightly, one of the most ridiculous Pokemon decks I have ever shown you. And I've shown you a lot of Pokemon decks over the years. And that's not clickbait to say that. And I'm not trying to trick you. This is one of the most ridiculous decks I have ever seen. I am willing to bet it's one of the most ridiculous decks that you have ever seen. And it is just a bit silly. It plays 7 different Tag Team GX Pokemon. And it plays 1 copy of each. I do a lot of deck building, and I get a lot of deck ideas, and ladies and gentlemen, I think it's safe to say I could have spent a year building decks using just the card pool we've got at the moment, and I would never have come up with this list. Maybe eventually, but it's still utterly ridiculous. So before we get into these 7 Tag Team GXs, we need to ask ourselves a question. How? How is this even possible? And the answer is Porygon Z. You see, we're getting a new Porygon Z in Unbroken Bonds, and this Porygon Z is wonderful, and I'm a big fan of it. Oh, I should mention, this is not just some random deck, it has won a tournament. You know, generally when I'm showing you Japanese decks, unless I tell you otherwise, they are winning decks. This is a good deck. So, okay, here we go. Porygon Z. So Porygon Z here's got an ability whereby, as often as you like during your turn, you may attach a special energy from your hand to one of your Pokemon. And then, of course, Porygon. I love it. I love Porygon. He's so cool. He was my original favorite Pokemon. Second place now after Mamoswine, but I still love him. But we do very quickly need to look at why we're playing the 50 HP Porygon when we have a 60 HP Porygon. And the reason is, the first attack, 1 colorless energy, flip 3 coins. For each head, search your deck for an energy card and put it into your hand. You don't have a great turn 1 play, although some of the Tag Team GXs can do that. But what it essentially does is it allows you to search out your special energy. Because that's what this deck does. It plays 4 copies of Rainbow Energy, and it plays 4 copies of each of the 3 Unit Energy. Which means essentially you have 8 copies of whichever energy you actually want. Whatever energy you're looking for, you've essentially got 8 copies of it. And you don't need to worry about the attack cost too much here, because Porygon Z allows you to attach as many of these as you like. So if we take something like Marshadow and Machamp Tag Team GX, a Pokemon which I've said very clearly I don't think is good because it's too expensive, and you look, 100 blows impact, fighting, colorless 160, that's a bit of a problem. No! 2 unit energy, 1 rainbow, you're off. And you can attach them all in one go using Porygon Z. This is phenomenal, and I love it. So, the crux of the deck is you're using Porygon Z to attach all this special energy. Let's very quickly run through the Tag Team GXs we are playing here. Because we're only playing 7, we're not playing them all. Marshadow and Machamp does 120 for 2 energy if you had a Pokemon KO'd the previous turn. And it's got a GX attack that does 200 damage, and if you would be KO'd next turn, you're not knocked out, you go down to 10 HP instead. Really good for hitting weakness against stuff like Pikarom and Zoroark, but also the GX attack here is great because you can essentially survive a hit from anything. You've got 1 copy of Eevee and Snorlax Tag Team GX, and this is here because it does amazing damage against evolution Pokemon. 4 energy, 240 to an evolved Pokemon, that's ridiculous. And then of course the GX attack can let you draw until you got 10 cards in hand, which can be good for consistency. We've got 1 copy of Gardevoir and Sylveon Tag Team GX, Good for weakness against dragon Pokemon, though they're not terribly relevant at the moment. But you've got a GX attack that makes your opponent shuffle their entire hand into their deck, which can just ridiculously slow your opponent down because they've got a 0-card hand and they're literally just relying on top decking, which is kind of funny. But you're also hitting the weakness here. 1 copy of Pheromosa and Buzzwole. Now you're hitting grass weakness against stuff like Lycanroc, which is pretty gosh darn nice. But you've also got a single energy option, which most of these don't have. 30 to the active, 30 to one on the bench. But you can do 190 for free energy, which is extremely efficient. And then you've got a GX attack where if you take a KO with it, you take 1 more prize. If you've got 7 extra energy attached, you take 3 more prizes. I would say that's probably extremely unlikely, though I will concede it is technically possible. But I think generally here, free energy 190 is what you're really going to do. We have got Muck and Alolan Muck here, which free energy, poison, take 8 damage counters between turns. And then 4 energy, 120. If they're poisoned, heal 100. That's pretty gosh darn good. Plus 0 energy GX attack, paralysis and poison. It's not bad, but I don't think it's as good as some of the other GX attacks we've got here. 1 copy of Gengar and Mimikyu Tag Team GX. Look at your opponent's hand. 50 damage for each trainer card in there. That can be pretty gosh darn good. Not to mention the fact that you're hitting Psychic Weakness against stuff like Buzzwole, which is quite nice. And then just a GX attack that stops your opponent playing any cards from their hand. And if you've got 2 energy on there, each player draws cards until they've got 7 in hand, which can then mean you do more damage with Poltergeist. This one's really there for Poltergeist. And then you've got Reshiram and Charizard Tag Team GX, which is there partly for Outrage, 2 energy, 30 plus 10 for each damage counter on it. But 4 energy, 230, you can't use it next turn. Now, to be fair, 6 energy, 300 damage goes through any effects on the defending Pokemon is pretty good, but it's really expensive, even in a Porygon Z deck. This is here 230, 4 energy. Because what you're doing here is you're hitting 5 different weaknesses. Eevee Snorlax doesn't hit for a weakness, and you've got 2 Psychic Pokemon here. But it's more than that. It's Eevee and Snorlax for evolved Pokemon. It's Muck and Alolan Muck for poison if they can't get out the active. It's Gengar and Mimikyu for if they're playing a trainer-heavy deck. It's Machamp and Marshadow to come in and hit for revenge, etc, etc. And I've run you through all the options of the GX attacks here. This is a silly deck which could actually be legit because Porygon Z, and I told you this when I showed you Porygon Z, Porygon Z gives you options that other decks just don't have. It lets you do dumb things, and I did say in that video that I think at some point we're going to have somebody playing a deck with all these different special energy. Here's the one. And maybe your opponent drops a Xurkitree and goes, well, now you just can't attach because you're only playing special energy. Maybe they do. But outside of something like that, this could work. Now, if we have a quick look at the trainer cards here, obviously we see 3 copies of Rare Candy because you need to get your Porygon Z out. We've got 3 copies of Nest Ball because you're playing a whole bunch of Tag Team GXs. They're all basics. You need to find them. But there's also a couple of Ultra Ball so that you can go ahead and grab your Porygon Z. There's then 2 copies of Pokemon Communication. You're playing a few Pokemon in this deck. It lets you swap one you don't want for one that you do. And then we've got 4 copies of Pokegear 3.0 because you need to get your supporters. More on that in a moment. There's also a single solitary copy of Energy Lotto because, well, you're playing lots of special energy. And this is the best way we've got to search out special energy, to be perfectly honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to have to play Energy Lotto. And then if we have a look at the supporter cards here, no stadiums, no tools. Because you're playing so much energy and a whole bunch of different Pokemon, this deck goes full on, I am gonna set up Porygon Z and Smash. And I'm going to pick which Tag Team GX I want. There are no other tricks whatsoever. This deck is built to get your Tag Team GXs out. And to that end, we've got 4 copies of Green Search. Green Search lets you grab any 2 trainer cards as long as you've got no Pokemon in play with abilities. That might sound weird, because this deck relies on Porygon Z, which has an ability. But Porygon Z is the only Pokemon you've got with an ability. When Porygon Z comes out, stop using Green Search. It's there to get your Porygon Z rolling. Search for an Ultra Ball and a Rare Candy. Boom, you're off. We've then got 3 copies of Lily, which is a nice little lot of draw here, and 2 copies of Erica's Hospitality. Both of these are straight draw, because you want to get your Porygon Z and Rare Candy in hand at the same time. Playing Shuffle Draw means you've then got to draw both those cards again. Lower your hand, keep Rare Candy or Porygon in hand, and then try and draw the other one. 2 copies of Judge for a little bit of disruption, give both players a new hand of 4. Could be very important, especially if you get a big bulky Tag Team GX rolling. Slow your opponent down, win the game. 2 copies of Guzma to drag Pokemon off the bench but also act as a switch. And the one which I suppose you could call the trick, 3 copies of Ace Roller. This deck relies on Tag Team GXs. This deck relies on just smashing with Tag Team GXs. And firstly, we play no Pokemon recovery here. No rescue stretcher, nothing like that. No Pokemon recovery. If they go down, you're not getting them back. Ace Roller stops them going down. But also if they go down, you give up free prizes. And you can't really afford to give up free prizes too often. You do it twice, you lose the game. So Ace Roller becomes really, really important here. This is a ridiculous deck. Just a silly, silly deck. Playing 7 different one-of Tag Team GXs, and then 16 special energy, no basic. There are several things about this deck list that jump out as weird. But it's one of my favourite decks I've seen in a long time. And also, right, if you're one of those people that likes to get one of every Tag Team GX, now there's a deck that lets you take advantage. I adore this deck. And yes, it's got some hard counters like Circuitry, and I don't even care. I think it's brilliant, and I love it. But I would like to know what you think about this. Do you think it's viable? Do you think it could be good? Do you think it's a metagame call? Do you think it's too fragile? Let me know in the comment section, ladies and gentlemen. Go nuts. But please do remember the rule. Be nice, would ya? And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWassy, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCGRadio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that, head on over to patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can do exactly that. And please do make sure you're checking out youtube.com/WassyPlays, where we talk about other games that don't have Pokemon in. But by far the most important thing, as always, look after yourselves till next time. Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.